Phil has been studying the world's spiritual traditions for more than 50 years. As a practitioner, teacher, and author, he's an interfaith minister, spiritual counselor, and public speaker, and has presented at major venues throughout the U.S. and has been featured in numerous publications. He's authored and co-authored more than 25 books, including Roadsides on the Spiritual Path, the award-winning America Veda from Emerson and the Beatles to Yoga and Meditation, How Indian Spirituality Changed the West, and the seminal biography, Life of Yogananda, the story of Yogi who became the first modern guru, and Spiritual Practice for Crazy Times, powerful tools to cultivate clarity, calm, and courage. He teaches courses on various online platforms, hosts Spirit Matters podcasts, and serves on the board of the Association for Spiritual Integrity. He also leads journeys to India through his company, American Veda Tours. Phil lives with his wife in the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts. And his website I've sent out with his speaker form. And maybe at the end, Phil, you can share about your upcoming class series that you'll be doing. So thank you so much for coming. Love to hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good to be with you all again. I wish it were in person over breakfast, but at least here it's a reasonable hour. It's 11 o'clock. I wanted to talk to you about karma because that's been on my mind. I'm working on a project about karma, and it's a deep and rich topic, so I'll give you an overview. Everybody knows basically what karma is. It's the word has become part of our everyday vocabulary as a kind of shorthand for cosmic justice. It's on product names now. I was at a friend's house who's recuperating from a broken leg, and her wheelchair has the Karma on the side. It's the name of the company. And it's on restaurant menus. It's in the news. You hear reporters refer to karma. You hear sports reporters talk about, what is the Dodgers karma and things like that. It shows up in sitcoms and in songs. Many of us are old enough to remember John Lennon's Instant Karma. But Willie Nelson has a song called A Little Old-Fashioned Karma Coming Down. Alicia Keys has a song called Karma. And even Taylor Swift has a song called Karma. So if you ask people what karma means, they'll usually recite a familiar aphorism like you reap what you sow, or what goes around comes around. And those are not incorrect, but they are oversimplifications. On the one hand, karma is very simple, very straightforward. Everything we do comes back like a boomerang. Very straightforward, but if you go into the intricacies of it, it starts to get more nuanced and complex. And there are many misconceptions about karma, and we want to go into those. Karma as a word derives from the Sanskrit root kri, meaning to do. It means action. simply that. Karma is used as action. And if you go back to the early sacred texts of India and the Vedas, that's all it means. Action. Some translate it as work, but it's usually action. Simply put, everything we do, every action is karma. That's how the word was used. But of course, it connotes a good deal more than just action. It's a theory of cause and effect. I say theory in the same sense that gravity is a theory in science. It's a known phenomenon. And in the case of karma, it can't be proven through experimentation, but it's an insight into the way things work in the universe that explains a lot and is very useful, even if it can't be proved in the scientific sense. But it's very nuanced, and it has profound ethical and moral implications, as well as a sort of overarching guidance system for how we ought to behave in the world. And it means simply that everything that happens to us is a result of actions we've taken in the past. And of course, that would have to include past lives. If if you take karma seriously, that everything we do, everything that happens now is the result of past actions, and what we do now in every moment is like planting a seed that will bear fruit at some point in the future. If you take it logically, that would have to include more than one lifetime, because on the surface, as we all know, in the span of one person's life, not everything works out so that righteous action is rewarded and bad actions bear unwanted consequences. Be that as it may, part of the theory is that actions will produce results, cause and effect, of a similar nature. It's like Newton's third law of thermodynamics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. When the seeds we plant through our actions will bear fruit, exactly what the fruit will taste like, we can't predict. But in general, what we do produces either, in Sanskrit, punya or papa. Punya is the desired effects, things we want to happen, things that give us pleasure, health, happiness, peace, love, etc. Papa are the undesirable effects, the things that bring us sorrow, anguish, unhappiness, disharmony, and so forth. So far, that's all nice and simple. And if you accept the theory of karma, that's enough to know. Do good things will come back to you. We experience this many ways in our lives, but of course, life is complicated. So let's talk about some of the things karma is not. And these are common misconceptions. First of all, it's not just about what we do. Karma means action, but not just outward physical actions. We create karma with our thoughts, with our attitudes, our motivations, our intentions. So you can't just take the act itself as the be all and end all. Things get nuanced. Say you're driving and you run into somebody. There's a big difference between that happening because you were driving in a responsible way and someone just dashed out into the street between cars and you hit the brakes and tried to avoid it, but you hit the person. That's very different karmically than if you were drunk and careless. And of course, it's really different if it happened because you were angry at the person and wanted to hurt him. Very different karma. And on the other side, suppose you swerved because you tried to avoid hitting a child and inadvertently hit somebody else. Or the person you hit, you did it deliberately because he took out a gun and was about to fire it into a crowd of people or something. So you might hit a pedestrian, but there's many reasons for it, many, and your intention, the mental process that went into it is more important than the action itself in determining the karma. So if we do something out of spite and anger, revenge, greed, it's very different from doing the exact same thing in the spirit of love or compassion or a larger good. Parents scold their children. There's a big difference between scolding a child out of love as a teaching lesson and because you're a selfish, narcissistic, cruel parent. Right? Okay. Second misconception, and I'll open it up to conversation. First, I'll go through the whole thing, if that's okay. Karma is not fatalism or determinism. The law of karma is inviolable, it's inexorable, but it's fixable. It's in our hands. The theory of karma, if you look into it, it assumes free will. All the texts of Hinduism and Buddhism that elaborate on karma, they all assume free will. And of course, philosophers have debated for millennia about whether we really have free will or we only think we have free will, and it only seems as though we have free will, but everything is really predetermined, including whether we believe in free will or not. But you can, in reality, in the moment, we seem to have choices. We seem to make choices. We make decisions. So even if, Alan Watts once said, as free people with free will, we are determined, and as determined people, we are free. There's a give and take between the effect of the past on our choices and the fact that in each moment we are free, or at least seem to be free to make choices. So karma is, in a sense, it's not one of the ways it's misconstrued is I can't help it, it's my karma. No, it assumes free will. It's the ultimate in personal responsibility. If you take karma seriously, there's no room for self-pity. There's no room for blaming other people for your own condition. There's no reason to, curse fate or God or whatever. It's all the result of our own actions in the past and how we respond to what happens to us in the present is also up to us. We have the capacity. If we have created negative karma in the past, it will come to us. It's like a self-addressed stamped envelope. It's going to come to us. You don't know when, but it's in the mail. And when it arrives, something negative happens. We could say, okay, this is a result of some past karma. But right now, in the moment, how I behave, how I respond to it, will determine my future karma. That's our responsibility. And one of the things we can do on an ongoing basis is by paying attention to, this is why it's very practical. If you know I'm creating karma in every moment, and I've made mistakes in the past, that's going to come to me. You can start remedying it, correcting the sort of karmic balance sheet by adding assets. I'm being businesslike now. By adding assets instead of creating new liabilities, right? So one guru once gave us this analogy. If you have taken out loans, you have debts. Someday the debts are going to come due. What do you do in the meantime? You can earn more money so that when the debts become due, it's not as much of a crisis. Similarly, we can create good karma now so that when the results of past behaviors come back to us in a negative way, it won't be so bad. The conditions of our life will be different. We will have added good karma to the balance sheet. Do the right thing, don't do the wrong thing. In that sense, it's very simple. The other thing, and I've alluded to this, is karma is not just about retribution. People tend to invoke the word only when something bad happens. Oh, it's karma. Most of the songs with karma in the title are about retribution. You done me wrong, and you're going to get what's coming to you. It's coming back. Reaping and sowing. But when we're showered by blessings, when life is good, when we have when good things happen to us, that too is karma. But we seldom think of it that way. We're showered by blessings and, we're grateful. That too is karma. That's the result of good actions we've taken in the past. We've accumulated both punya and papa. We've accumulated karma that will come back to us in unwanted forms, but we've also accumulated karma in desirable ways. And I would venture to say that most of the people on this call are very fortunate in their lives. When you compare our life conditions to other parts of the world and the people who are suffering terribly, it's not only reason to be grateful, but also in a karmic sense to be not proud. We don't want to create bad karma by puffing up our egos, but just to know that these principles of cause and effect apply across the board. Some effects are desirable, some are not, and some are mixed, because life is life. Similarly, karma is it's not about reward and punishment. We often think of it that way, maybe because, we grew up in this Judeo-Christian culture with the image of an almighty judge who determines what happens to us, or we can't necessarily, even if we don't believe in that, it's somewhere imprinted, and so people think of positive karma as a reward for good behavior, and negative karma as a punishment. But that's making the cosmos a kind of judicial system. It's more beneficial, more accurate to, and healthier, I think, psychologically, to think of things that happen, the events that happen in our lives, as results or consequences of past action, rather than rewards or prizes for being good, or penalties for having done wrong. This cause and effect model is more amenable to a science of natural law, as opposed to the sort of judgmental religious model. Think of it as an energy exchange, a system like what physicists study, forces acting on objects. Our thoughts and deeds, everything we think, everything we do, emits energy. And the force of that energy produces orderly reactions out there that conform to natural laws, just as billiard balls. If you hit them at a certain speed, at certain angles, it produces an effect on others, or electromagnetic energies. If you change the magnitude and the amplitude or whatever, different results will happen. We can think of our actions and our thoughts in that way, as opposed to being in a court of law. We're part of an energy system. An even better way, or complementary way, to think of it as it's an educational system. That's how most of the traditional teachings about karma present it. It's an educational. The cosmos is here for our learning, for our growth, our spiritual growth. Learn the right lessons, and we move on to the next curriculum. We get a passing grade. Start having to learn new lessons. Fail to learn the lessons, and you have to repeat the class until you get it right. Similar lessons will keep coming to you. Have you gotten it yet? Oh, okay. You've made the necessary changes. Let's move on to the next course. It's an evolutionary model about learning and transformation and growth. And karma teaches us through both pleasure and pain, victories, defeats, gains and losses. And our job is to take what comes, learn from the experience, and do better as we move forward. Life as a lesson plan. Another misconception that needs to be cleared up is karma is not an excuse. It doesn't justify apathy or complacency or indifference. It does not sort of cancel out the virtues like empathy and compassion and caring. And I say this because it's very common. And this happened also in India, you know, the birthplace of theories like karma. People misconstrue it and use it as an excuse so that when something bad happens, a mass catastrophe, or an individual or group goes through exceptional tragedies, you hear things like, oh, well, it's their karma. Nothing I can do about it. And personally, when I hear that, it makes me crazy. It's of course true that it's that person or that group's karma, whatever is happening. But it's our karma to respond to it. And how we respond affects our karmic debts and our balance sheet. So when we see suffering in the world, whether it's just, you know, a friend or a relative or just something in the news, to just write it off and dismiss it, well, it's karma. That may be comforting and it may be true. But what will produce more favorable karma for you? Being compassionate, being helpful, or just writing it off and being indifferent and callous. That too creates karma. Obviously, when something happens in the world, I mean, this gets very complicated because, you know, there's such a thing as, it's not just individual karma, there's family karma, there's group karma, there's national karma, all kinds of groupings of karmic destinies. And sometimes it's inexplicable when things like, you know, mass murder or war or floods and earthquakes happen and people suffer miserably, innocent people. You know, I came across this thing. This is not, of course, not just about karma, but it's also about people who believe in a interventionist God if you misconstrue things. Apparently, in the early days of America, you know, pre-revolutionary days when the pilgrims were here and all that, they had a certain kind of religious belief in many groups. Apparently here, where I'm now living in New England, those early Puritans, if a house was on fire, say by lightning, the fire brigade would come and they'd protect the nearby homes, but they would leave the home that's burning to burn because the theory was if the lightning hit that home, it was God's will and the inhabitants must have deserved it. People do the same thing in the name of karma. The caste system in India and the inequalities and the injustices of it were by the privileged groups would call up, you know, say it's karma. So it's meant to be this way. And the, you know, people at the lower class, it's their karma from past lives or whatever. And so that gave them an excuse not to do anything about it. People did that with slavery. You know, slavery must be God's will. They're slaves in the Bible. And so, you know, these things have to be countered. And finally, I want to focus a bit on another sort of misconception, but a very important point. In the Bhagavad Gita, where karma is described, and in many ways just implied, because it was assumed to be part of the truth of life. But at one point in chapter 4, there's this very interesting line where it says, the course of karma is unfathomable. Sometimes it's translated, the course of action is unfathomable, but the original word is karma. And sometimes it's translated, the course of karma is difficult to know, or impossible to understand, or mysterious, or things like that. I like the word unfathomable. What does that mean? In essence, as we've seen, karma is simple and straightforward. You reap what you sow. But the intricacies are beyond human comprehension. And trying to figure out exactly what happened in the past to cause what's going on in the present, or to try to work out precisely what's going to happen in the future as a result of what you're doing now, is a fool's errand. And is discouraged by all the teachers about karma. One Buddhist text I came across says that the Buddha, the historical Buddha, named 4 things that can neither be conceived of or explained by the human mind. One of those 4 is the notions of karma and consequence. Now, why is this important? Because I've seen this a million times. Something happens, like, oh, my house was broken into. Oh, you must have been a thief in your past life. So-and-so betrayed me. Oh, you must have betrayed someone in just that way in a past life. It makes for good stories, and you'll find in every tradition legends, stories, tales, fairy tales that teach us, that meant to teach us, do good and good things will happen, whether you call it karma or God's will or whatever. But it's usually very oversimplified. Life is much more complex than that. And we can't know what happened in the past that's causing the present, because it's not just one thing. It's the total account. Everything you do goes into your karmic account. And you don't know what. It's not like one thing happened in the past. Maybe it is, because sometimes it's perfectly obvious. You do something nice for someone, that person's likely to do something nice for you. You punch somebody, you're likely to get punched back. But most karma, most of the things in life are far more complicated than that. For one thing, what happens between me and another person, it's not just my karma, it's also the other person's karma. And maybe it's also somehow my wife's karma comes into play, or that person's family, or things in the past. It just gets far more complicated than the human mind can explain. And this is true of speculating about past lives as well. You probably have seen, like I have, people who say, oh, they know they were such and such or so in the previous life. I've even had people tell me who I was in my previous life because they claim to have that ability. And, it's funny because usually it's a famous person. Back in the early 70s, I actually knew two different women who didn't know each other, both of whom told me they had been Mary Queen of Scots. If we had time, I'll tell you about the time I was told I had been Lord Byron in a previous life. We don't know. No one's ever like, oh, I was a shopkeeper in my previous life, or, I was a butcher. But it may be fun to indulge in that kind of speculation, and it might help explain what's going on in our lives or some of our personality traits and our behavioral patterns, to speculate about past lives or things we did earlier in our lives. And sometimes it might have some truth.
Are you open to, sorry, are you open to getting some questions? I know we're entering the last phase of the talk.
I'll finish this off.
Right. Okay.
Think of it this way, just as an image. If you drop a pebble into a calm pond, a scientist could predict when the wave that's produced will strike the shoreline and return to the point where the pebble was dropped. But if you drop 8 or 10 pebbles of different sizes into the pond at close intervals, very quickly the waves will start to collide with one another and intermingle, change their direction, speed, and it gets very chaotic. Tracing the reverberations of one pebble gets very complicated. So if you take that as a metaphor for real life situations, at every moment, you're dropping a thought and an action into the pond like a pebble, but so are thousands and millions of other people, all dropped into the pond in our little corner of the universe, producing interactions among crisscrossing energy waves. And natural law will make sure that what you drop in is going to come back. It will find you. But for us to think we can trace that and figure it out is that's why it's considered unfathomable. The bottom line of it is thinking about karma can make us think about the past. Oh, what did I do? Why is this happening now? What karma did I produce in the past? It can also make us think about the future. If I behave this way now, good things will happen to me in the future. But it always brings us back to the present. You may think about past and future, but the attention should be on the present. Someone, Guru once said, if you want to know about your past lives, look at your present life. If you want to know about your future, look at your present life. How we behave now determines how we respond to past karma and the karma we produce in the future. That's the bottom line. So now I will open it up. Is there a procedure, or do I just?
Whoever you'd like to call on, it looks like Hedia has her hand up first.
Yes, I see that.
Thank you, Phil. I appreciate this talk for many different reasons. And one of them is that years ago, I started saying, I don't believe in karma because people use it as a punishment and shaming. And you did mention that. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna subscribe to using the word karma when only bad things happen to people, or shaming them and blaming them. And I appreciate that you expanded on it, and I appreciate it also that you said, I do have a question. I also did appreciate that you said our karma is tied with other people that we're engaging in. I love that expansion. So my question is, how do we reconcile this expansion of karma when children, so I'm a spiritual counselor, life coach, and when people come to me and they talk about being abused as children, either sexually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and I've had therapists say this to me, oh, it was your karma, from a place of punishment. Like as a child, I was abused, and many children get abused on so many different levels. How do we reconcile with compassion and understanding that? So how do you address that with people? Because my thing is just have, like, teaching people to have compassion for themselves, and I don't know what else to say, kind of thing.
Yeah. I really appreciate the question. And look, you turn on the news every day and you say, how children are dying in Gaza, children are dying in the Ukraine. It's horrible. And it becomes most horrible when it is children. You can't get more innocent than that. If you accept karma as a theory, and if you accept the tie into past lives, then you would have to say, well, somehow the laws of karma came to this group of children and not to that group of children. So the past comes into it. But this is where the point about it being unfathomable comes in. And if you say, there's no understanding this, there's no way to explain it. But karma at least frames it so that there's some sense that there's the possibility of justice in the universe. But it doesn't change how we behave in the present. You behaving with compassion and kindness and love is very different from if you were to say, hey, well, it must be your karma. Maybe you abused somebody in your past. That would be cruel. That would be callous. And that's not good karma. It's not helpful. And it doesn't accrue to your karmic benefit. But if you come with a big heart and compassion, even if you can't explain it, and who can explain these things? I mean, in a case like that, I would much prefer to refer to an expert in child psychology and in trauma and abuse, regardless of the person's belief system, if they can be of help. And that's their karma, whether they believe in karma or not. It's their karma to be there for that person and to do the right thing and to help them. And so are we. It's like right now, I know a lot of spiritual people are saying, oh, well, it's, our collective karma to have this crazy political situation going on. I'm above it all. No, you're not. You're going to be affected by it. And it's your karma, whether you choose to, be of help or not. And you can cry your eyes out just seeing the horrors that go on in the world. And you can also, your heart opens up and you feel nothing but gratitude and admiration for the good people who are trying to do something about it. The psychologists, the doctors, the rescue workers, these are people whose karma is putting them in a situation of being of tremendous service in the world. And we have to think about, what we can do in our own little ways. I mean, that's the bottom line of karma. What can I do? How can I help?
Good, yes. We have two more people who would like to ask a question or make a comment. How about Caroline?
You're muted.
Unmute. Good.
Pardon me. Hi,
Hi.
thank you. This has really been delightful. I have two questions. One is a physics question, and one is a kind of a spiritual or just something else. Anyway, first question is, here you have the third law of thermodynamics, which says for whether every action is a reaction, an opposite reaction, and yet when we do good stuff, it does come back to us.
Yeah.
So isn't that the opposite?
I think by opposite in this sense, we mean the opposite direction. We put something out, it comes back. It's the opposite direction.
Oh,
As opposed to the opposite quality. You get what I'm saying?
now I do.
Yeah.
It's the circle. Okay. And the other question is, we talk about doing good now so that we will get more good in the future. How about just doing good to feel good? Because it seems right.
Why not? But if you're thinking about the future, then you have the motivation to do good. But also think of it this way. The feeling of doing something right, that's also the future. That happened after you did the thing. So it's an immediate future. It's instant karma. And that's another beautiful thing. It's like, oh, I have the karma in the moment of doing something good right now as I do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Great questions.
Last comment for Mary Grace.
First, oh my gosh, thank you so much, Phil. I knew this was going to be a very deep, meaningful morning, and it certainly is for me. I really appreciate that you've taken it to a depth, beyond the superficial judgment that I hear that used with the word karma so much. And just kind of one additional comment. I have a belief personally that the things that happen also are ultimately for my learning, my involvement, and the human part of me may hate the process, and yet what really helps and supports me through it is that, okay, I look, what's the purpose in my life? How can I use this for my involvement?
Beautiful.
So the way that you've put karma, that fits together, in the mystery of it all.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Everything is grist for the mill, as Ram Dass once said. There's one of the swamis I talked about, and the reason this is on my mind, by the way, is I'm writing a book about karma. And I interviewed a scholar, Swami, and he said there's a whole branch of Indian philosophy that's thought of as evolutionary Vedanta, and that this understanding of karma fits into that. It's an evolutionary model of, school system of the universe, so to speak. And that's a useful spiritual lesson, whether you believe in karma or not. If everything is seen not as punishment or reward, but as a lesson plan, it facilitates our growth and our, we become wiser if we look at it that way, rather, because what's the alternative? You can regret, and you can blame, and you can get angry, and when bad things happen, or you can say, what am I to learn from this?
So I'm so grateful for one, for your flexibility with the date coming in.
Oh,
And
yeah.
would you want to say briefly about your class and then send me an email?
Yeah, I have, and the reason Mary Grace, she must be on my mailing list and saw this coming up. I have, there's an organization called Infinity Foundation that's in Chicago, and they have classes and workshops, like other organizations do. And they usually, in the past, they were all in person in the Chicago area. But because of COVID, we all discovered Zoom, and now they have, anybody anywhere can take their courses online. infinityfoundation.org, I believe. So if they have a lot of good stuff. And what I have coming up are 2 classes, actually next week, next Monday and the Monday after in the evening from 8, well, your time, it would be in LA, 5 to 6:30. And it's called Karmic Relief for Crazy Times.
Wow.
So I'm going to be addressing a lot of, stuff that we talked about today, but in more detail and with practices. As Mary Grace said, one of my previous books is called Spiritual Practice for Crazy Times. So I'm going to draw from that and talk, we'll have 3 complete hours over the course of 2 Mondays. And you can find that at infinityfoundation.org.
I trust Mary Grace will send us the link.
I will send it out by email. I've signed up, and just another note, if you can't attend at that time, if you sign up for it, you will receive a recording, which is what I'll do.
That's right. I should have mentioned that, right? Because people
yeah.
sometimes can't show up in person, but that's the beauty of the technology we now have.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Phil. This is a wonderful.
Thank you. It was
Thank
a joy
you.
to be with you all
Thank you back.
and
Yes.
to know our karmic paths crossed once again.